All right, so get this. Try to wrap your head around a rocket booster, like the size of a 23-story building, coming back down from space and nailing a landing on, get this, giant robotic arms.
It's wild, isn't
I
it?
mean, it's like something straight out of a movie.
Yeah.
But guess what? That's exactly what SpaceX just did. It was their latest Starship test flight.
It really feels like we're living in the future, right?
It really does. And, it's funny. For a lot of companies, this would just be some flashy PR stunt.
Right.
But SpaceX, they're playing the long game, am I right?
Absolutely. They're laser focused on making space travel as routine as, well, as catching a flight. And the key to that is reusability.
Exactly. Reusability is huge. And it's not just any rocket we're talking about here. This is the Super Heavy booster. And let me tell you,
Yeah.
that name is no joke.
No kidding. This thing makes even NASA's Saturn V, the one that got us to the moon, look tiny.
Wow.
It's officially the most powerful rocket we've ever built. Just incredible lifting power.
That's mind-blowing. But for those of us who aren't, rocket scientists, what does all that power actually translate to? Like, what could they actually do with it?
Okay, imagine launching 25 jumbo jets, fully loaded, into orbit all at once.
Seriously.
Yeah, that's the kind of payload we're talking about with Super Heavy. It's a game changer. All sorts of missions that used to be impossible are suddenly within reach.
It's insane. But I got to ask, all that power, it's because Super Heavy is only half the equation, right? There's something else.
You got it. Super Heavy teams up with the Starship spacecraft. They work together. It's like, a cosmic two-stage system, if you will.
Okay, I like that, a cosmic system. So how's it work?
So picture this. Super Heavy is like a heavy-duty pickup truck. And Starship is the camper on the back. Super Heavy gets the whole shebang off the ground and into space. Then Starship detaches and carries on with the mission, whether it's the moon, Mars, you name it.
And speaking of Starship, I heard that thing had its own wild ride during this test.
It did. While Super Heavy was doing its whole grand entrance back on Earth, Starship was busy, how do I put this? Surviving a fiery encounter with the atmosphere.
Yeah, I imagine that re-entry gets a little toasty, to say the least.
Toasty's an understatement. We're talking about temperatures close to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
You're kidding.
I wish I was. That's the kind of heat Starship has to deal with as it plunges back into Earth's atmosphere.
Oh man, I'm sweating just thinking about it. So how did Starship do with all that heat? Any, melting?
Surprisingly, it held up great, all things considered. SpaceX made some major upgrades to Starship's heat shield.
The heat shield?
Yeah, it's made of these special tiles that are designed to protect it during re-entry.
So they basically gave Starship a suit of armor for its fiery descent.
Exactly. And it seems these upgrades did the trick, especially after the last test flight. Remember, the heat shield got kind of beat up.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty.
Yeah, this time they beefed up the tiles and redesigned the steering fins.
Sounds like a good call. So after surviving that inferno, what happened to Starship? Did it stick the landing?
For this test, Starship's target was actually a splashdown in the Indian Ocean, like a very high-stakes belly flop, if you will.
A controlled crash landing.
Yeah, basically. They wanted to mimic a future landing on the moon or Mars, and since those places aren't exactly known for their oceans.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so they skipped the whole landing on solid ground thing this time around.
Okay, so back to Super Heavy for a sec. Everyone's calling it the chopstick maneuver, catching a rocket in midair. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, it's about as crazy as it sounds. We've seen SpaceX land those Falcon 9 boosters before, but those land on their legs, right?
Like on platforms or drone ships, yeah.
Exactly, but this, snatching a booster right out of the sky while it's still moving super fast, that takes a whole other level of precision.
I bet. So how on earth did they even manage to pull that off? It seems impossible.
Not impossible, but seriously hard. They use these massive robotic arms, they call them Mechazilla, which I gotta say, pretty fitting name.
I mean, why not, right?
And these arms, they're mounted on the launch tower. Yeah, so Mechazilla, these massive arms, they have to move with incredible precision to catch Super Heavy as it's coming down.
I can only imagine.
It's like, think of catching a pencil falling from the top of a skyscraper.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
But instead of a pencil, it's like thousands of tons of metal blasting out superheated gas.
And you're trying to catch it with chopsticks.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about pressure.
Right. And the fact that SpaceX actually pulled it off, it just shows how committed they are to innovation, pushing the limits of what we thought was possible.
Absolutely. And it's not just about cool tech, right? Seeing Starship come through that fiery reentry makes you think, what does all this mean for, the average person?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because this isn't just about rockets and space travel. This is about, like, fundamentally changing how we access space. When you make launches cheaper and more frequent, it's going to impact everything.
So it's kind of like going from dial-up to, like, super fast fiber optic internet, that kind of game changer for space.
Exactly. Think about it. Faster, cheaper launches. The possibilities are endless. We could have more scientific research, mine resources from asteroids. Even space tourism could become a thing.
I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but it's becoming our reality. And speaking of giant leaps, we got to talk about SpaceX and NASA's Artemis program.
Absolutely. SpaceX is building a special version of Starship. The idea is it'll act as a lunar lander for the Artemis missions. So yeah, this successful booster catch, it puts us that much closer to seeing astronauts walking on the moon again. And get this, the first woman on the moon could be on one of these missions. How cool is that?
That's incredible. It really feels like we're on the verge of like this whole new era of space exploration.
Yeah.
And this time, it's not just about planting a flag and calling it a day.
Right, you got it. Artemis is about creating a sustainable presence on the moon, like a base camp.
A base camp, that's a good way to put it.
It's a crucial step. It lets us test out all sorts of things before we attempt even bolder missions, like, sending humans to Mars.
And that's where reusability becomes even more critical, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Imagine trying to build a house, but every time you need to hammer a nail or saw a piece of wood, you have to buy brand new tools.
That would be crazy expensive and a logistical nightmare.
Exactly. Reusability changes the game. It makes these ambitious missions actually doable.
Okay, so it's not all smooth sailing, though, right? There's been some, let's call it tension between SpaceX and the FAA about launch licenses.
Yeah, I think it highlights just how tricky it can be to balance, groundbreaking innovation with regulation.
Because SpaceX, they move fast. They're known for pushing the envelope.
Exactly. And on the other side, you've got the FAA. Their top priority is safety and making sure everything's done by the book.
Which makes sense. Launching giant rockets is inherently risky.
You got it. And when you're dealing with cutting-edge experimental tech like Starship, it's even riskier. So both sides play a crucial role here. SpaceX pushes the boundaries, and the FAA makes sure those boundaries are pushed responsibly.
Yeah, it's a tough balance for sure, but got to have those conversations, right? Got to make sure everyone's on the same page if we're going to do this whole space thing right.
Couldn't agree more. It's like, we're figuring this out as we go, both the technology and the rules. But it's a conversation that needs to happen, especially when we're talking about something as huge as the future of space exploration.
And whoa, what a future it's shaping up to be.
Yeah.
Seriously, this whole conversation has just blown my mind. Giant robots catching rockets, building bases on the moon, sending people to Mars. It's wild.
It's incredible, isn't it? It feels like things are changing so fast. We're not just dipping our toes into space anymore. This is a whole new ballgame.
Totally. We're going from baby steps to giant leaps. All systems go.
Exactly. And it's not just about the technology either. People are starting to realize, hey, we've got some big challenges here on Earth. And space, it offers a whole new perspective, maybe even some solutions.
So it's not just about escaping our problems. It's about learning from space and bringing that knowledge back to Earth.
Right.
Like a giant science experiment to help humanity.
That's a great way to put it. When we study other planets, it teaches us so much. Climate change, resource management, heck, even the origins of life itself. Plus, space exploration pushes the limits of what we can do, and that leads to breakthroughs in all sorts of fields. Material, science, medicine, even things like communication technology. Everyone benefits.
It's like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Or in this case, maybe space is the mother of invention.
Haha, I like that. And the most exciting part, this is just the beginning, what we're seeing with Starship. It's like a sneak peek of what might be possible down the road in the years and decades to come. It's pretty exciting stuff.
It really is. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
That we're on the edge of something truly amazing. A whole new era of exploration and human achievement. It's a time full of possibilities, and it's up to all of us to be part of it. Ask the big questions, engage in these conversations, and let's shape the future of space exploration together.
Amazing, well said. This deep dive has given us a lot to ponder. And to our listeners, we hope this inspires you to, keep looking up at those stars and never stop dreaming big. After all, the future of space exploration is being written right now. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.